The rust-colored dust swirled around Kalen Vance's helmet as he trudged across the barren landscape of Xylos. The magnetic storm was picking up strength, the telltale purple-tinged clouds gathering ominously on the horizon. He checked his wrist computer, 3 hours until it would hit full force. Plenty of time to make it back to his shelter if he turned around now. But the mineral scanner in his hand was showing promising readings. Traxium deposits, potentially rich ones, just over the next ridge. The rare mineral would fetch enough credits to keep him supplied for months, maybe even afford some upgrades to his ancient atmospheric craft. Just a little further, he muttered to himself, his voice echoing inside his helmet. Then I'll head back. Kalen had been on Xylos for nearly 4 years now, scraping out a solitary existence on this frontier planet in the Shattered Belt region. Far from the core worlds, far from authority, far from memories. Just how he wanted it. The jagged rocks of the ridge proved more treacherous than they appeared. By the time he reached the plateau where his scanner indicated the richest deposits, the storm had accelerated. The sky had darkened to an ominous purple-black, and the magnetic interference was already affecting his equipment. His scanner flickered, then went dead. Damn it! Kalen slammed the device against his palm, but the screen remained blank. He looked up at the rapidly approaching storm front. He had misjudged badly. There was no way he would make it back to his shelter now. Survival instincts kicked in. Kalen scanned the rocky terrain for any natural shelter. The magnetic storms on Xylos were legendary. They could fry electronics, disorient compass readings, and the particulate discharge could even penetrate substandard environment suits. He needed cover, and fast. A dark opening at the base of a cliff face caught his eye. A cave, potentially deep enough to provide adequate protection. Without hesitation, he scrambled toward it, the wind now howling around him, picking up dust and small debris. The cave entrance was narrow, but opened into a larger chamber. Kalen switched on his suit lights and examined his surroundings. The cave walls were smooth, too smooth to be natural. Ancient carvings covered some surfaces, geometric patterns, and symbols he didn't recognize. An abandoned mine, perhaps, or something older. He didn't care, as long as it offered protection from a storm. He moved deeper into the cave system, mapping his route carefully on his backup analog compass. The Interplanetary Extraction Corporation had a minimal presence on Xylos, but their jurisdiction technically covered the entire planet. Independent prospectors like Kalen operated in a legal gray area, tolerated as long as they didn't find anything too valuable. The ICC would claim ownership of any significant discoveries, by force if necessary. Kalen had seen their methods firsthand during his time as a transport pilot. The memory of the Ganymede incident still haunted him. The mining colony uprising, the ICC's brutal response, the transport full of civilians that was shot down during the evacuation. His transport, his responsibility. The fact that the official reports blamed pilot error rather than ICC fighters only deepened the wound. He pushed the memories away, focusing instead on his immediate survival. The cave network was extensive, far larger than he'd initially thought. As he ventured further, the ancient carvings became more elaborate, more deliberate. This was no mine. This was something else entirely. A faint sound stopped him in his tracks. He cut his lights and listened. There was again a soft, whimpering sound like a wounded animal. Or a child. Impossible, he thought. Nothing lived this deep in the Shattered Belt. Besides, there were no settlements for hundreds of kilometers. Cautiously, he moved toward the sound, keeping his mining laser ready. As he turned a corner, his lights fell upon a small, huddled figure. A child, or at least childlike in form. Its skin was a pale blue, almost luminescent in the darkness. Large, silver eyes reflected his suit lights, filled with fear. He somehow knew, was pressed against the wall, trembling, her small body appearing frail and exhausted. Kalen froze. The girl was clearly not human, yet she was no species he recognized from his travels. Could she be one of the rumored indigenous Xylosians? He'd heard whispers about native tribes, but most dismissed them as frontier myths or ICC propaganda to justify restricted zones. "Hey there," he said, lowering his weapon and crouching to appear less threatening. "I'm not going to hurt you." The girl flinched at his voice, but didn't flee. Now that his eyes had adjusted, Kaelin could see she was injured. A gash on her arm oozed a silvery blue fluid. Her simple clothing was torn and dirty. She looked starved. Hesitantly, Kaelin reached into his pack and pulled out one of his ration bars. Outside, the storm howled, magnetic discharges causing his suit systems to flicker. They were both trapped here until it passed. "Are you hungry?" he asked, unwrapping the bar and offering it to her. The girl's silver eyes darted from his face to the food and back again. Slowly, trembling, she reached out and snatched the bar, retreating quickly back to her corner. She sniffed it cautiously before taking a small bite. Her expression changed immediately. Relief, perhaps even joy. She devoured the rest in seconds. Kaelin pulled out his water canister. "Thirsty?" This time, she approached with less hesitation, accepting the container and drinking deeply. Kaelin watched in silence. Who was she? Where had she come from? More importantly, how had she ended up alone in these caves? "My name's Kaelin," he said, tapping his chest. "Kaelin." The girl tilted her head, studying him curiously. Then she pointed to herself. "Lyra," she said, her voice soft and melodic, with an accent he couldn't place. "Lyra," he repeated. "Nice to meet you." Outside, the magnetic storm raged through the night. Inside the ancient cave, an unlikely pair, a grizzled human prospector and a mysterious alien child, shared what little food and water the man had brought, finding unexpected sanctuary together in the darkness. Dawn brought silence as the storm finally dissipated. Kaelin checked his equipment. Most systems were still functional, though his communications array was fried. Lyra had fallen asleep, curled up nearby, looking peaceful despite their harsh surroundings. As Kaelin prepared to scout the cave entrance, a sound from deeper within the tunnel system froze him in place. Footsteps, deliberate and approaching rapidly. He positioned himself between Lyra and the sound, mining laser rays. A tall figure emerged from the shadows. Kaelin's breath caught. She stood nearly 2 meters tall, with the same pale blue skin as the child, but covered in intricate patterns, tattoos, or perhaps natural markings, that seemed to shimmer with subtle bioluminescence. Her silver eyes narrowed at the sight of Kaelin's weapon. In one fluid motion, she produced a curved blade that hummed with energy. Her stance was unmistakable, a warrior ready to kill. "Step away from the child," she commanded in heavily accented common, her voice deep and resonant. Before Kaelin could respond, Lyra awoke. Seeing the newcomer, she cried out joyfully and ran to her, speaking rapidly in an unfamiliar language. The warrior's expression softened as she knelt to embrace the child, though her eyes never left Kaelin. "My daughter says you gave her food and water," the warrior said, rising to her full height again. "Is this true?" Kaelin lowered his weapon slowly. "She was hungry. I shared what I had." The warrior studied him intensely, her gaze seeming to penetrate his environmental suit. Finally, she sheathed her blade. "I am Seraphina of the Eastern Cliffs clan," she said formally. "You have my gratitude for aiding Lyra." "Kaelin Vance," he replied. "Independent prospector. I was just taking shelter from a storm." Seraphina reached for a device at her belt, an ancient translator, its casing worn and patched. She spoke into it, then turned it toward Kaelin. The device buzzed and crackled. "The ancestral covenant ritual binds us now," the mechanical voice translated. "You fed my child in her hour of need. By the ancient laws, I am bound to you until the debt is repaid or until released by ritual." Kaelin frowned. "I don't understand." Seraphina spoke again, the translator struggling to keep up. "My life is yours, not as slave, but as bound protector. This is our way. This is law." "Look," Kaelin said, holding up his hands, "I appreciate the sentiment, but there's no need for whatever this is. I was just helping a kid in trouble." Seraphina's expression remained solemn. "The covenant cannot be refused once formed. It is done." Before Kaelin could argue further, a distant sound echoed through the cave system, the unmistakable whine of ICC dropship engines. Serafina tensed. They found us. We must move. Who found you? The ICC? Why are they after you? Instead of answering, Serafina gathered Lyra into her arms and moved toward another tunnel. At the entrance, she paused, looking back at Kalen. Come or stay. Your choice. But know that your fate is now tied to ours by blood and deed. Cursing under his breath, Kalen followed. He had no love for the ICC, and his curiosity about these strange aliens was piqued. Besides, his shelter was in the opposite direction from the approaching ships. Going with them, at least temporarily, made tactical sense. They navigated the tunnels with Serafina leading confidently, as if born to the darkness. After nearly an hour of silent travel, they emerged from a hidden exit into a ravine, far from where Kalen had entered. The sky was clear now, Xylos's harsh sun beating down on the rust-colored landscape. In the distance, dark shapes of ICC vessels circled the area where the main cave entrance was located. They're searching the whole sector, Kalen observed. What did you do to get the ICC so riled up? Serafina set Lyra down gently. It is not what we did. It is what we are, what we know. She turned to Kalen, her silver eyes reflecting the sunlight. You are a pilot? Kalen's hand unconsciously went to the worn flight insignia still attached to his environment suit. I was. Transport class. How did you know? Your movements. Your eyes always check the sky. She gestured toward a ridge in the distance. My vessel is hidden beyond that rise. If you truly wish to be free of the Covenant, help us reach the ancient sanctuary. There, perhaps, we can perform the release ritual. Kalen weighed his options. His own shelter was compromised if the ICC was sweeping the area. His communications were down, and despite his better judgment, he felt responsible for these two now. Fine, he said finally, but I want answers along the way. They set out across the rocky terrain, keeping to ravines and overhangs to avoid aerial detection. Lyra, despite her small size, kept pace remarkably well, occasionally running ahead to scout. Serafina remained vigilant, her hand never far from her weapon. As they traversed a particularly exposed stretch, Lyra suddenly froze, her head tilted as if listening. Before Kalen could ask what was wrong, Serafina pulled them both behind a boulder. Moments later, a native predator rounded the corner. A Xylosian razor spine, a six-legged reptilian creature with bony protrusions along its back. It sniffed the air, sensing their presence. Kalen reached for his mining laser, but Serafina placed a restraining hand on his arm. With her other hand, she pulled a small device from her belt. She whispered something to Lyra, who covered her ears. Serafina activated the device. A high-pitched sound, barely audible to Kalen, emanated from it. The razor spine reared back, shaking its head in obvious distress before fleeing in the opposite direction. Sonic deterrent, Serafina explained, seeing Kalen's surprise. We understand the native fauna. You really are indigenous to Xylos, Kalen said with dawning realization. The rumors were true. We are Xylosian, Serafina corrected. This world's true name is Xylos. Your kind renamed it without right or respect. They continued their journey, with Kalen growing increasingly curious about his mysterious companions. During a brief rest in the shade of an overhanging cliff, he finally asked the questions burning in his mind. This covenant you mentioned. Explain it to me. Serafina was checking Lyra's injured arm, applying a salve from a small pouch. The Ancestral covenant is sacred tradition. When one saves the life of another through nourishment in dire times, a bond is formed. The saved one's kin owes life debt to the Savior. And that means... What exactly? I am bound to protect you, serve alongside you, until equivalent life debt is repaid or ritual dissolution is performed. She looked up from tending to Lyra. I am not your servant. I am your shield, your spear, your companion by ancient right. Kalen ran a hand through his sweat-dampened hair. And you just accept this? Because of some ancient tradition? Would you break your most sacred laws when it is convenient? Serafina asked, her tone suggesting she already knew humans would. The Covenant has preserved our people through millennia of hardship. It is not burden, but honor. Lyra spoke up then, using the translator. You gave last food. We remember kindness. Something in the child's simple statement touched Kalen in a way he hadn't felt in years. He turned away, uncomfortable with the emotion. The ICC, he said, changing the subject. Why are they hunting you? Seraphina's expression darkened. I am keeper of ancient knowledge. My clan mark, she indicated the patterns on her skin, contains data about this world's true resources. ICC discovered this recently. They wish to extract information, not just minerals. Extract. From you. Kalen asked, a chill running down his spine despite the heat. Our markings contain biodata. Extracting it would mean death. She met his gaze steadily. Some of my people have already fallen this way. Before Kalen could respond, the ground beneath them trembled slightly. They all tensed. Mining charges, Kalen whispered. They're getting closer. By nightfall, they reached the ridge Seraphina had indicated. Beyond it, nestled in a narrow canyon, was their vessel, a Xylosian skimmer that resembled a cross between a living organism and technology. It was approximately the size of a small shuttle, with a hull that seemed to pulse subtly, its surface covered in patterns similar to Seraphina's skin markings. Biomechanical? Kalen asked, running a hand along its smooth surface. Living metal, Seraphina corrected. Bound to my lineage. It will accept you now because of the Covenant. Inside, the craft was surprisingly spacious, with organic-looking control interfaces that lit up as Seraphina approached. Lyra immediately went to a small alcove that was clearly her sleeping area, exhaustion finally catching up to her. As Seraphina prepared the vessel for departure, Kalen studied the interior. The technology was unlike anything he had encountered in his years of space travel. Not more advanced, necessarily, but fundamentally different in approach. Your people developed all this independently? He asked. We did not develop it. We remembered it. Seraphina's hands moved over the controls with practiced ease. Our ancestors once traveled between stars. Then came the great forgetting. Now, few remember the old ways. Fewer still can operate the ancient vessels. The skimmer rose silently, hovering just above the canyon floor. Where exactly is this sanctuary? Kalen asked as they accelerated smoothly forward. The place of ancestors, Seraphina replied. 3 days' journey to the south, in the region your maps call the Crimson Badlands. Kalen frowned. That's deep ICC territory. They have a primary extraction facility there. Yes, they built atop our most sacred place, not knowing what lies beneath. For the next 3 days, they traveled by night, hiding the vessel in caves or crevasses during daylight hours. During these periods of rest, Kalen learned more about the Xylosians and their culture. Lyra, becoming more comfortable with him, taught him simple words and phrases in their language. In return, he shared stories of the planets he had visited during his transport pilot days, carefully avoiding mentions of the tragedy that had driven him to Xylos. On the afternoon of the 3rd day, as they prepared for the final leg of their journey, Seraphina unexpectedly touched Kalen's arm, the first time she had initiated physical contact. The bond grows stronger, she observed. You feel it. Kalen had indeed noticed something strange, a sense of awareness regarding Seraphina, as if he could sometimes perceive her emotions or know her location without looking. He had attributed it to heightened situational awareness from their dangerous circumstances. Is that part of this Covenant thing? He asked uncomfortably. Yes. The bond has levels. First comes awareness, then understanding. She studied his face. You fear this connection. I don't like feeling entangled. The word came out more harshly than he intended. Seraphina withdrew her hand. Entanglement is the nature of existence. Your people simply pretend otherwise. That evening, as they approached the Crimson Badlands, Kalen took the controls at Seraphina's request, allowing her to rest. Lyra sat beside him, pointing out constellations through the forward viewport and naming them in her language. The peaceful moment was shattered by a proximity alarm. Kalen activated the vessel's sensors. ICC patrol craft, he reported grimly. They've spotted us. Serafina was instantly alert, moving to the controls. How many? 2 interceptors. Fast attack class. Kalen's old pilot instincts kicked in. They're trying to hurt us toward that plateau. Probably have ground forces waiting. Can you evade them? Kalen studied the unfamiliar controls. Maybe, if this thing is as responsive as it looks. Serafina nodded once, then moved aside. The vessel will recognize your intent through the covenant. Fly. Trusting his instincts, Kalen took control. The skimmer responded to his touch as if it were an extension of his body, more responsive than any craft he had ever piloted. He sent it into a steep dive, hugging the contours of a narrow canyon, using the terrain to break the interceptor's targeting locks. One of the ICC craft followed too closely, clipping its wing on a rock outcropping. It spiraled away, trailing smoke. The second interceptor maintained pursuit, firing warning shots that streaked past their vessel. They're not trying to destroy us, Kalen noted. They want us intact. For now, Serafina replied grimly. Kalen spotted a narrow fissure in the canyon wall ahead, barely wide enough for their vessel, certainly too narrow for the bulkier ICC interceptor. Hold on, he warned, then banked hard, aiming directly for the opening. The skimmer slipped through with only centimeters to spare, scraping along both sides with a sound like tearing fabric. Behind them, the ICC craft pulled up sharply, unable to follow. They emerged into a vast basin, its floor covered in rusty dust that swirled in their wake. At the center rose a massive ICC extraction facility, a sprawling complex of industrial structures, surrounded by defense turrets and landing pads filled with corporate vessels. The sanctuary is here? Kalen asked incredulously. Under that, Serafina pointed to a distinctive formation at the far edge of the basin, a mesa with a flat top and perfectly vertical sides. There, the table of ancestors. The entrance is beneath. That's at least 1 kilometer of open ground from any approach, Kalen observed. And they'll have the air covered in minutes. As if to confirm his assessment, alarms blared again. Multiple signals appeared on the sensor display. A full squadron of ICC craft launching from the facility. We cannot reach it by air, Serafina agreed. We must go on foot through the underground passages. Land there. She indicated a ravine just outside the basin perimeter. Kalen brought the skimmer down into the ravine, powering down its systems. As they prepared to disembark, Serafina removed a panel from the vessel's interior, revealing a hidden compartment containing weapons, energy spears similar to hers, and what appeared to be ceremonial armor. She donned the armor quickly, its segments shifting to fit her form perfectly. It enhanced her already imposing presence, the patterns on the armor aligning with those on her skin. Here, she said, offering Kalen a smaller weapon that resembled a handgun, but with organic lines. Sting thrower. Non-lethal, but effective. You don't want to kill them? Kalen asked, surprised. Killing brings blood debt, she replied simply. We have enough debts already. Lyra emerged from her alcove, wearing a small pack. Serafina knelt before her, speaking softly in their language. The child nodded solemnly, touching her forehead to her mother's. She stays with the vessel? Kalen guessed. No, the vessel will return home without us to mislead pursuers. Lyra comes with us. She knows the sacred passages. Serafina's expression was grim. They were made for children's size in the ancient days of hiding. They exited the skimmer, watching as it rose silently and disappeared to the north, presumably on some pre-programmed course. Then, with Serafina leading, they made their way toward the edge of the basin, staying low and using the terrain for cover. As night fell completely, they reached the perimeter of the ICC facility. Floodlights swept the area, and security drones buzzed overhead. Serafina led them to what appeared to be an ancient drainage system, its entrance half buried in dust and debris. Many of our sacred places have been built upon by those who came later, she explained, clearing away the obstruction. They never looked beneath their feet. The passage beyond was narrow and dark, requiring them to proceed single file. Lyra went first, her small form moving confidently through the darkness. Kalen followed, with Seraphina bringing up the rear. They had traveled perhaps half a kilometer when a tremor shook the passage, dislodging dust and small rocks from above. "Extraction machinery," Seraphina whispered from behind. They drilled deeper each cycle, closer to the sacred chambers. As they progressed, the tunnel began to change character. The rough-hewn walls gave way to smooth surfaces covered in the same kind of geometric patterns Kalen had seen in the cave where he had found Lyra. The air grew warmer, with a faint scent like ozone. Finally, they emerged into a vast underground chamber, so large that their lights couldn't illuminate the ceiling. Ancient columns rose from the floor, their surfaces covered in bioluminescent markings that provided a soft, blue-green glow. "The outer sanctuary," Seraphina said, her voice hushed with reverence. In the center of the chamber stood a raised dais, upon which rested what appeared to be an altar or control console, a semi-transparent structure that pulsed with inner light. Around it were gathered several robed figures with the distinctive blue skin of Xylosians. One of the figures turned at their approach, an elderly Xylosian, his skin a paler blue than Seraphina's, the patterns on his face so dense they almost merged into a solid mass. He leaned on a staff topped with a crystalline formation. "Guardian Thelos," Seraphina greeted him, pressing her fist to her chest in salute. "We seek sanctuary and counsel." The elder studied them, his gaze lingering on Kalen. "You bring an outsider to the sacred chamber?" His voice was thin but carried authority. "He is bound to me by the covenant," Seraphina explained. "He saved Lyra's life, sharing his last sustenance." Murmurs arose from the other robed figures. Fellows raised a hand, silencing them. "Approach, human," he commanded. "Let me see this bond." Kalen stepped forward reluctantly. The elder placed a gnarled hand on his forehead. A strange sensation followed, like fingers rifling through his thoughts and memories. "The bond is true," Fellows announced, withdrawing his hand, though unusual in its strength. He turned to Seraphina. "You have been pursued. The defilers above grow restless. Their machines breach our upper chambers even now." As if to punctuate his statement, another tremor shook the chamber, stronger than before. Dust and small fragments of stone rained down from the unseen ceiling. "We have come for the release ritual," Seraphina said, "and to warn of a new danger. The ICC has learned of the biodata in our markings. They hunt us specifically now." The elder's expression grew grave. "This we know. 3 from the Western Marsh clan were taken 2 cycles ago. Their knowledge was extracted." He spoke the last word with profound sorrow. Lyra suddenly tugged at Seraphina's armor, pointing upward and speaking rapidly in their language. Everyone fell silent, listening. The distant sound of drilling gave way to a new noise, the distinctive whine of ICC plasma cutters, much closer than before. "They follow," one of the robed figures exclaimed. "How could they track us through the ancient tunnels?" another asked. Realization dawned on Kalen. "It's me," he said grimly. "My environment suit. ICC issues tracking implants in all licensed equipment. I disabled mine years ago, but if they recalibrated their sensors specifically to look for human tech signatures." Fellows nodded gravely. "You have led them directly to our most sacred place." Before anyone could respond, a section of the chamber's wall exploded inward. Through the dust and debris emerged ICC security forces in full tactical gear, weapons drawn. Behind them came a tall figure in an officer's uniform, a hard-faced woman with cold eyes and a commander's insignia. "Commander Forlag," Kalen breathed, recognizing the infamous ICC security chief from his transport days. She had been involved in the Ganymede incident, directing the forces that shot down civilian vessels, including his. "Fascinating," Forlag said, surveying the chamber. "All this hidden right beneath our facility." Her gaze fixed on the gathered Xylosians. "So the native specimens do have technology after all. The research division will be pleased." Seraphina stepped forward, her stance protective. This place is sacred. Leave now. Forelag smiled thinly. I'm afraid I can't do that. Your people possess valuable biological data that rightfully belongs to the ICC. She gestured to her forces. Secure them all. Minimal damage to the specimens, particularly the marked ones. The ICC forces spread out, weapons trained on the Xylosians. Kalen tensed, the sting thrower hidden against his leg. There were at least 20 security personnel, all heavily armed. Wait, he called out, stepping forward with his hands raised. Commander Forelag, I'm Kalen Vance, former ICC transport pilot. Forelag studied him with mild surprise. Vance? The Ganymede deserter? Interesting company you're keeping these days. I didn't desert, Kalen said, inching closer to her. I resigned after your forces shot down my transport full of civilians. After you falsified reports to blame pilot error. Ancient history, Forelag dismissed, and irrelevant to current operations. She turned to her second-in-command. Begin with the Elder. His markings are most developed. As two security officers moved toward Thelos, Serafina suddenly leaped into action. With blinding speed, she took down 3 ICC guards before they could react, her movements fluid and precise. The remaining Xylosians scattered, some revealing hidden weapons of their own. Chaos erupted in the chamber. Kalen used the distraction to tackle Forelag, his years of suppressed rage finding an outlet at last. They crashed to the ground, struggling for control. Despite his fury, Forelag was combat-trained and matched him move for move. Across the chamber, Serafina fought like a force of nature, her energy spear cutting through ICC weapons and armor with ease. But the security forces were numerous and well-equipped. One by one, the robed Xylosians fell to stun blasts. Thelos remained at the central dais, his hands moving over the pulsing control surface, chanting in the ancient Xylosian tongue. Lyra had disappeared from sight. Kalen finally gained the upper hand on Forelag, pinning her arms. Call them off, he demanded. Forelag merely smiled. Too late. A scream of pain cut through the chaos. Serafina. An ICC officer had caught her with some kind of energy net that constricted around her, delivering electric shocks. She fell to her knees, her spear clattering to the ground. No! Kalen shouted, his momentary distraction allowing Forelag to break free. She struck him hard, sending him sprawling. As Kalen struggled to his feet, he saw more ICC forces surrounding Thelos at the dais. The Elder continued his chant, even as they aimed their weapons at him. Stop this, Kalen called out. This place isn't just a temple. It's their history, their knowledge. Precisely why it's valuable, Forelag replied coldly, drawing her sidearm. The ICC appreciates the cultural artifacts, but the biodata is our primary interest. She aimed at Thelos. Last chance, specimen. Surrender or die where you stand. Thelos looked up, his ancient eyes finding Kalen's across the chamber. A message seemed to pass between them, a decision, a request. Then Thelos raised his staff high and brought it down hard upon the console. A blinding flash of energy erupted from the central dais. When Kalen's vision cleared, he saw Thelos slumped over the console, Forelag's blast having caught him in the chest. But something was happening. The patterns on the Elder's skin were glowing intensely, the light spreading to the console beneath him. What's happening? Forelag demanded, backing away from the growing light. The patterns on the chamber walls began to glow in sequence, the light spreading outward like ripples in water. Serafina, still entangled in the energy net, looked up at Kalen, her silver eyes reflecting the spreading light. The awakening, she gasped through her pain. He has activated the Ancestor's defense. A deep rumbling sound filled the chamber, not from above but from below, as if the planet itself were stirring. The ICC forces looked around in confusion and growing alarm. Kalen fought his way through the chaos towards Serafina. An ICC guard moved to intercept him, but Kalen was beyond caution now. He fired the sting thrower, catching the guard in the chest. The man dropped instantly, paralyzed but conscious. Reaching Serafina, Kalen clawed at the energy net, receiving painful shocks for his effort. How do I get this off? The control. Serafina managed, nodding toward a small device on the ground near the fallen officer. Kalen lunged for it, but Forelag was faster. She crushed the device beneath her boot. Nobody leaves with ICC property, she stated, aiming her weapon at them both. Before she could fire, a small blur shot from the shadows, Lyra, wielding a shard of crystal like a dagger. She slashed at Forelag's leg, causing the commander to cry out in surprise and pain. The distraction was enough for Kalen to tackle her again, this time disarming her with a swift strike to the wrist. The rumbling grew stronger. Cracks appeared in the chamber floor, glowing with the same blue-green light as the patterns. Several ICC guards began to retreat toward the entrance they had created. "The place is coming down," one shouted. "We need to evacuate." Forelag, pinned beneath Kalen, snarled in frustration. "Take what specimens you can and fall back." The remaining ICC forces began to withdraw, dragging two unconscious Xylosians with them. Kalen, still struggling with Forelag, failed to notice an ICC officer approaching from behind until a searing pain exploded in his back, the distinctive burn of a plasma weapon. He collapsed, his vision tunneling. Through the haze of pain, he saw Lyra slashing at the energy net with her crystal shard, finally creating a tear large enough for Serafina to break free. Forelag used the opportunity to escape Kalen's weakened grip, scrambling to her feet and retreating with her forces. Serafina immediately rushed to Kalen's side, her face tight with concern. "The wound is deep," she said, examining his back. "The Covenant. I feel your pain." Kalen tried to speak, but blood filled his mouth. The last ICC forces were disappearing through the breach, taking their captured Xylosians with them. As Kalen's consciousness began to fade, something extraordinary happened. The Covenant bond between him and Serafina intensified, becoming almost visible, a gossamer thread of blue-green light connecting them. Through this connection, memories and sensations flowed both ways. He saw Serafina's life, her childhood in the cliff dwellings, her years of training to become a keeper of knowledge, the ritual embedding of biodata into her skin markings, the birth of Lyra, the growing threat from the sky people who sought their secrets. He felt her fierce pride, her love for her daughter, her initial resentment at being bound to an outsider that had transformed into respect and something deeper. In turn, Serafina experienced Kalen's memories, his years as a transport pilot, the horror of the Ganymede incident when his ship full of innocent colonists was shot down, the guilt that had driven him to the farthest reaches of space, his lonely existence on Xylos, and the unexpected spark of connection he had felt upon finding Lyra in the cave. As their minds merged through the ancient power of the Covenant, something awakened within the sanctuary itself. The patterns on the floor beneath them illuminated in response, forming a complex geometric web that spread outward to connect with the glowing patterns on the walls. Thelos, with his final act, had not merely activated a defense system. He had initiated a far more ancient protocol. From the central dais where his body still lay, waves of energy pulsed outward. The crystal in his staff resonated with the energy, amplifying it. Lyra, still clutching her crystal shard, gasped as it began to glow in harmony with the sanctuary. She spoke rapidly to her mother in their native tongue. "Yes," Serafina replied, her voice filled with awe. "The ancestral awakening." Just as the old stories told, the energy waves reached Kalen and Serafina, enveloping them in a cocoon of light. Kalen felt a strange sensation, the burning pain in his back diminishing as warmth spread through his body. The wound was not healing exactly, but changing somehow, becoming part of him rather than destroying him. Above, the ICC extraction machinery that had been drilling into the sanctuary abruptly failed, its systems overloaded by the energy emanating from below. Throughout the facility, alarms blared as equipment malfunctioned and sensors reported impossible readings. Within the sanctuary, the remaining Xylosians gathered around the central dais, their voices joining in an ancient chant. The energy cocoon surrounding Kalen and Seraphina pulsed in rhythm with their voices. Gradually, Kalen's strength returned. The wound in his back no longer felt like a fatal injury, though it still pained him. As the energy field dissipated, he struggled to his feet with Seraphina's support. "What happened?" he managed to ask. "The sanctuary recognized our bond," Seraphina explained, her voice filled with wonder. "The covenant between us has been blessed by the ancestors. It saved your life." One of the elder Xylosians approached them. Guardian Thelos knew what he was doing. He gave his life to activate the heart of Xylos. The defilers above have been neutralized. Temporarily. "The ICC will be back," Kalen warned, his voice stronger now. "With reinforcements." "Yes," the elder agreed. "But now we have time to evacuate the sacred knowledge. And thanks to your bond with Seraphina, we have something else, insight into our enemy." Lyra tugged at Kalen's hand, offering him a small flask. "Healing water," she said through the translator. "Drink." The liquid tasted of minerals and something else, something that reminded Kalen of the energy that had enveloped him. As he drank, strength continued to flow back into his limbs. "We need to rescue the captured Xylosians," Kalen said, thinking of those the ICC had taken. "And stop Forlag," Seraphina added, her expression hardening. "She knows too much now about our biodata." The sanctuary continued to pulse with energy, but at a steadier rhythm now. The most intense phase of the awakening had passed, leaving the sacred chamber transformed. Where cracks had formed in the floor, new crystalline structures had emerged, glowing with inner light. "The heart of Xylos strengthens," the elder observed. "It has not been this active in many generations." Kalen looked to the breach where the ICC forces had entered. "We need to seal that entrance. And we need a plan." The remaining Xylosians gathered in council around the central dais, where Thelos' body had been respectfully arranged. The elder who had spoken to them was named Elevar, now the senior guardian present. He outlined what the awakening meant. "The heart of Xylos is not merely a defense system," he explained. "It is the collective consciousness of our ancestors, preserved in crystalline form. Guardian Thelos has joined with it now, adding his knowledge to the whole." "What does that mean for us?" Kalen asked. "For stopping the ICC?" "It means we have access to ancient knowledge and technology," Seraphina answered, "including weapons, if necessary." As they spoke, Xylosians worked to seal the breach with a crystalline substance that hardened rapidly upon exposure to air. Others tended to the wounded or monitored energy readings from various points in the sanctuary. "The ICC facility above is in disarray," Elevar reported after consulting a living display that had formed on one wall of the chamber. "Their systems are damaged. They evacuate their personnel. But as you said, they will return." Kalen studied the display, recognizing the overhead layout of the ICC extraction facility. "They'll move their captured Xylosians off-planet as soon as possible. We don't have much time." "Then we must strike now," Seraphina declared. While they were weakened, a plan took shape. Using the sanctuary's ancient technology, they would infiltrate the ICC facility above. A small team would locate and rescue the captured Xylosians while simultaneously sabotaging the facility's communication array to prevent them from calling reinforcements. Kalen, Seraphina, and 3 Xylosian warriors would form the rescue team. Lyra would remain in the sanctuary, protected by the remaining guardians. As they prepared, Elevar approached Kalen privately. "The bond between you and Seraphina is unprecedented in its strength for one not born as Xylos. The ancestors have acknowledged this by healing you." "What does that mean?" "It means your life forces are now intertwined more deeply than any normal covenant bond. What affects one affects the other." Elevar's expression was solemn. This could be both blessing and burden. Before Kalen could ask more, Seraphina called him over to receive his equipment. The Xylosians had provided him with a suit of their living armor, lighter than his. Environment suit, but surprisingly strong. Like Seraphina's, it adjusted to fit his form perfectly. "This will help mask your life signs from ICC sensors," she explained, "and provide some protection." As Kalen donned the armor, he felt a strange resonance, as if the material were somehow recognizing him through his bond with Seraphina. The patterns on the armor's surface shifted subtly, taking on a configuration that mirrored some of the patterns in Seraphina's own markings. "It adapts to you," she observed with surprise. Another sign of the ancestors' blessing. When they were ready, Elevar guided them to a different passage from the sanctuary, an ancient maintenance tunnel that would bring them up directly beneath the ICC facility's main structure. According to the living display, it would emerge near the detention area where the captured Xylosians were most likely being held. Before they departed, Lyra embraced both Seraphina and, to his surprise, Kalen. "Return safe," she said in carefully practiced common. Both. The tunnel was narrow and steep, requiring them to climb for much of the way. Kalen's back wound still pained him, but the Xylosian healing water had done its work. He could move without debilitating agony. More surprisingly, he found his strength and endurance enhanced by the living armor, which seemed to support his movements and distribute weight optimally. They emerged, as planned, in a maintenance sublevel beneath the main ICC facility. Emergency lighting cast a red glow over abandoned equipment. The awakening had clearly caused significant systems damage. Coolant leaked from pipes, and several electrical panels sparked dangerously. "They have evacuated this level," one of the Xylosian warriors observed. "But security forces will remain above." Using Xylosian sensory devices that detected life signs, they navigated through the damaged sublevel toward an access shaft that would take them to the detention area. Twice they paused to avoid automated security drones that still patrolled despite the facility's compromised state. As they approached the access shaft, Kalen felt a strange sensation through his bond with Seraphina, a warning. He raised his hand, signaling the group to stop. "Something's wrong," he whispered. "An ambush." Seraphina nodded, having felt the same intuition. She gestured to the warriors, who spread out, taking covering positions. One produced a small device that released a tiny flying probe, no larger than an insect. It disappeared up the access shaft. Moments later, the warrior checked a display on his wrist. 8 ICC security forces, he reported, waiting at the upper level. "They have energy shields and heavy weapons." "They knew we would come," Seraphina said grimly. "Then we change approach," Kalen decided. He pointed to a different corridor. The facility schematics showed environmental control systems in that direction. "If we can access them, we can maybe create a diversion." They moved quietly through the damaged corridors until they reached the environmental control hub, a circular room filled with monitoring equipment and control interfaces. Most systems were offline, but the life support and atmospheric controls still functioned on backup power. Kalen examined the controls. His experience with ship systems gave him enough understanding to work with a similar technology. "If we redirect superheated steam from the geothermal taps into the ventilation system for the detention level, it would force an evacuation." One of the warriors stepped forward. "I can interface with this technology." His hands, bearing specialized markings, moved over the control panels with surprising familiarity. "Our ancestors designed systems not unlike these." Working together, they reprogrammed the environmental controls. Warning alerts flashed across the screens as they overrode safety protocols. "Ready," the warrior announced. "On your command." Kalen looked to Seraphina, who nodded. "Do it." Alarms blared throughout the facility as superheated steam was diverted into the ventilation system of selected areas, the detention level, and adjacent corridors. On a security monitor that still functioned, they watched ICC personnel rapidly evacuating the affected zones. "Now," Seraphina commanded. They moved quickly back to the access shaft, ascending to the now empty detention level. The air was hot and humid, condensation dripping from every surface. Emergency breathing masks from their equipment protected them from the worst effects. The detention cells were located at the end of a long corridor. As they approached, Kalen held up his hand again. Forlag wouldn't abandon the prisoners that easily. He was right. 2 security officers remained at the detention entrance, wearing full environmental suits. They spotted the approaching group, and immediately opened fire. The Xylosian warriors moved with incredible speed, using the steam-filled corridor for cover. One fell too, a well-placed shot, but the other two reached the guards, engaging them in close combat. Despite their heavy weaponry, the ICC officers were no match for Xylosian strength and fighting skills. With the entrance secured, they accessed the detention area. Inside were the two captured Xylosians, secured to examination tables with energy restraints. Medical equipment surrounded them, some already connected to their skin, where ICC scientists had begun the process of extracting biodata. "They live," Serafina confirmed, quickly working to disable the restraints. "But they are weakened." As they freed the prisoners, a voice came over the facility's announcement system, Commander Forlag's. "Attention intruders. You are surrounded." The atmospheric disruption was a clever trick, but ultimately futile. "ICC reinforcements have arrived. You have 1 minute to surrender before we flood the entire detention level with paralytic gas." Kaylin checked the exits on a nearby security panel. She's not bluffing. All routes are blocked by security teams. Serafina helped one of the weakened Xylosians to his feet. There must be another way. Kaylin studied the facility schematic on the panel. There, he pointed to a maintenance shaft that led directly down to the sublevels. "It's narrow, but it should get us back to where we came in." They moved quickly, locating the access panel for the maintenance shaft hidden behind storage units. Kaylin forced it open, revealing a tight vertical passage with ladder rungs embedded in the wall. "Hurry," he urged, helping the wounded Xylosians into the shaft. The warriors went first, then the rescued prisoners, with Serafina and Kaylin covering the rear. As Kaylin prepared to enter the shaft himself, the detention area doors burst open. Commander Forlag stood there, flanked by heavily armed security forces. "Vance," she called out. "Still playing the hero? You couldn't save those colonists on Ganymede, and you can't save these creatures." Kaylin froze, old guilt mixing with fresh rage. Serafina grabbed his arm. "She baits you. We must go now." Instead of responding to Forlag, Kaylin pulled a small device from his armor, a Xylosian explosive charge they had brought as a last resort. He activated it and tossed it toward the oxygen regulation system on the far wall. "Run," he shouted to Serafina, pushing her into the shaft and following immediately after. Behind them, Forlag realized the danger too late. The explosion wasn't large, but it was precisely targeted. The oxygen system ruptured, creating a rapidly spreading fire that triggered the facility's emergency protocols. Blast doors began closing automatically throughout the level. They descended the shaft as quickly as possible, hearing chaos erupting above them. By the time they reached the sublevel, emergency sirens were blaring throughout the entire facility. "The fire will spread," Kaylin explained as they regrouped. "ICC protocol is to evacuate non-essential personnel and seal affected sections. It should buy us enough time to get back to the sanctuary." They made their way back through the damaged sublevel to the ancient tunnel, carrying the weakened rescued Xylosians. As they descended into the safety of the tunnel, a massive explosion rocked the facility above them. Secondary detonation, Kaylin observed grimly. Something critical was hit. They continued downward, returning to the sanctuary where Elevar, Lyra, and the remaining Xylosians waited anxiously. The rescued captives were immediately taken to a healing chamber, while the others gathered to report on what had transpired. "The ICC facility is severely damaged," Serafina told the gathering. "But Forlag survived, and reinforcements have arrived. They will regroup and return in greater numbers." Elevar nodded gravely. "Then we must complete the awakening and prepare to leave this place. The heart of Xylos has stirred. Now it must be moved to safety." "Move it?" Kaylin asked. "I thought it was part of the sanctuary itself." "The heart is contained within the sanctuary, but it can be transported," Elevar explained. "It has been done before, in ancient times when our ancestors fled devastation. The gathered Xylosians began preparations for a sacred ritual, the transference of the heart. As a non-Xylosian, Kaylin was asked to observe from a respectful distance, though his bond with Serafina gave him a unique perspective on the proceedings. Through her, he sensed the deep spiritual significance of what was occurring. The heart of Xylos was not merely a power source or database of knowledge. It was, in some sense, the collective soul of the Xylosian people, containing the essence of generations of ancestors. The ritual lasted for hours, with the guardians chanting in harmony while manipulating the crystalline structures that had emerged from the sanctuary floor. Gradually, these structures converged toward the central dais, forming a single massive crystal that pulsed with inner light. As the ritual neared completion, Seraphina approached Kalen. "The heart will soon be ready for transport. We will take it to the eastern cliffs, where my clan maintains a hidden sanctuary." She paused, studying his face. "But first, there is something I must offer you." "What's that?" "The release ritual," she said solemnly. "As promised, now that we have reached the sanctuary, it can be performed. You would be free of the covenant bond between us." Kalen was surprised to find himself hesitating. The bond, which had initially seemed an unwelcome entanglement, had become something more. Through it, he had experienced a connection that filled the emptiness he had carried since Ganymede. More than that, he had found purpose again, and something like family in Seraphina and Lyra. "What happens if I don't choose release?" he asked. "The bond remains. We continue as we are, connected, our fates intertwined." Her silver eyes held his gaze steadily. "It is your choice. The covenant was formed without your knowledge or consent. It is your right to dissolve it." Before Kalen could respond, a massive tremor shook the sanctuary, far stronger than the earlier disturbances. Dust and fragments of stone rained down from above. Elevar rushed over, his expression alarmed. "They have returned, with excavation charges. They mean to collapse the entire sanctuary." Another explosion rocked the chamber, larger than before. A section of the ceiling gave way, crushing two Xylosians before others could pull them to safety. "The heart is not yet fully prepared for transport," Elevar said urgently. "We need more time." Kalen looked to Seraphina, a decision crystallizing in his mind. "Get your people and the heart out through the escape tunnels. I'll buy you time." "How?" she demanded. "By giving Forlag what she really wants." He gestured to himself, the man who humiliated her, the witness to what happened at Ganymede. "No," Seraphina said firmly. "The bond between us is exactly why this will work," Kalen interrupted. "Through it, you'll know I'm alive. And through it, I'll find my way back to you." Another explosion shook the sanctuary, larger still. More sections of the ceiling began to crack. "There's no time to argue," Kalen insisted. He turned to Elevar. "Get them out. All of them." Elevar hesitated, then nodded. He began directing the Xylosians toward the escape tunnels on the far side of the sanctuary, the crystalline heart now being carefully moved by the guardians. Lyra broke away from the group, running to Kalen and embracing him fiercely. "Come back," she said simply. "I will," he promised, meeting Seraphina's gaze over the child's head. "Take care of your mother for me." Seraphina approached, her expression a complex mix of emotions. "The covenant will guide you back to us," she said, placing her hand over his heart. Where she touched, a warm glow emanated briefly beneath his armor. "This is not farewell." With that, she took Lyra's hand and joined the retreating Xylosians, looking back only once before disappearing into the escape tunnel. Kalen moved in the opposite direction, toward the breach where the ICC forces had first entered. Another explosion rocked the sanctuary, this one close enough to shower him with debris. The ICC was systematically destroying the ancient chamber. Reaching the sealed breach, Kalen used a Xylosian tool to dissolve the crystalline material. Beyond, he could hear the sound of ICC drilling equipment drawing closer. When the barrier was weakened enough, he called out, "Forlak, Commander Forlak, this is Kalen Vance." The drilling stopped abruptly. After a moment, Forlag's voice came through from the other side. "Vance? Surrendering already?" "I want to negotiate," he replied. "Just you and me." "The Xylosians are evacuating as we speak, taking their precious artifacts with them. But I have information you want about Ganymede, about the Xylosian biodata, everything." A pause followed. Then, stand back from the barrier. The drilling resumed, more carefully now. Within minutes, a hole appeared in the crystalline barrier, widening until it was large enough for a person to step through. Commander Forlag entered first, flanked by security officers with weapons trained on Kalen. She looked much as she had during their earlier confrontation, though a fresh burn marked one side of her face, likely from the explosion Kalen had triggered in the detention level. "Where are the artifacts?" she demanded immediately, scanning the sanctuary. "Where are the specimens?" "Gone," Kalen said simply. "But I'm still here." Forlag's eyes narrowed. "The man who ruined my perfect record at Ganymede. The one witness who could contradict the official report." Her mouth twisted in a cruel smile. Perhaps this operation isn't a complete loss after all. More ICC forces poured through the breach, securing the chamber and searching for any Xylosians left behind. Finding none, they reported back to Forlag. "They've taken some kind of crystal," one officer reported. Energy readings indicate it was the power source for this entire complex. Forlag frowned. "Track them. I want that artifact." She turned back to Kalen. "As for you, I think a long debriefing at ICC headquarters is in order. The research division will be particularly interested in your connection to these creatures." Two officers moved to restrain Kalen. He offered no resistance, allowing them to secure his hands with energy cuffs. Through the covenant bond, he could sense Seraphina and the others moving further away, the heart of Xylos safely in their possession. He had bought them the time they needed. "You think you've won something here," Forlag said as they led Kalen toward the breach. "But once we extract what you know, we'll find them again. This planet belongs to the ICC." Kalen met her gaze steadily. "You're wrong about that. This planet has always belonged to them, and now it's fighting back." As if in response to his words, another tremor shook the sanctuary, but this one felt different, more deliberate. The patterns on the walls, dimmed since the heart's removal, suddenly flared with renewed light. Forlag looked around, alarmed. "What's happening?" Kalen smiled. "The awakening isn't over." Throughout the sanctuary, the crystalline structures that hadn't been taken with the heart began to pulse with energy. The ground trembled continuously now, the vibrations building in intensity. "Evacuate," Forlag ordered, suddenly recognizing the danger. "Get to the surface." As the ICC forces scrambled to retreat, dragging Kalen with them, the sanctuary's final defense activated. From the central dais where the heart had rested, a wave of energy erupted, racing outward along the patterns on the floor and walls. It overtook the fleeing ICC personnel, causing their equipment to fail and their weapons to overload. In the confusion, Kalen's guards lost their grip on him. The energy cuffs short-circuited, falling away from his wrists. He immediately broke free, moving against the flow of panicking ICC forces. Forlag spotted him. "Vance!" she shouted, drawing her sidearm. But before she could fire, a section of the ceiling collapsed between them, cutting off pursuit. Kalen ran toward the escape tunnels the Xylosians had used, guided by his bond with Seraphina. Behind him, the sanctuary continued to collapse, burying the ICC forces or forcing them into a desperate retreat. The tunnel was narrow and dark, but Kalen's armor provided enough illumination to navigate. He ran for what seemed like hours, the sound of destruction gradually fading behind him. The tunnel sloped upward, eventually emerging onto the surface of Xylos, far from the ICC facility. The red sky of dusk greeted him as he stepped out onto a rocky plateau. In the distance, he could see the plumes of smoke rising from where the ICC facility had stood. More importantly, he could feel Seraphina's presence through their bond, distant but unmistakable, like a beacon guiding him home. Kalen set out across the barren landscape, following that inner compass. The journey would be long and dangerous, but for the first time in years, he wasn't alone. Somewhere ahead, Seraphina and Lyra awaited him. Somewhere ahead, a new purpose and a new family called to him. As night fell on Xylos, a solitary figure moved steadily eastward across the desert, guided by an ancient bond that transcended worlds. A bond formed by a simple act of kindness, when a lonely man fed a hungry alien child, and, in doing so, found his way home. 3 weeks later, Kalen stood at the edge of a cliff face, looking out over a vast canyon bathed in the golden light of Xylos' setting sun. Below, nestled into the cliff itself, was the hidden sanctuary of the Eastern Cliffs clan, Seraphina's people. Dwellings carved into the rock face, connected by bridges and ladders, housed several hundred Xylosians. At the center of the settlement, in a specially constructed chamber, rested the heart of Xylos, now safely relocated. His journey had been arduous. The ICC had sent search parties after him, forcing him to travel only at night and hide during the day. Twice he had narrowly escaped capture, but the Covenant bond had guided him true, growing stronger as he neared his destination. When he had finally arrived, exhausted and weather-beaten, he had been welcomed not as an outsider, but as one of their own. The Covenant bond with Seraphina had marked him as family. Now, as he watched the sunset, he sensed Seraphina approaching before he heard her footsteps. "Still contemplating the view?" she asked, coming to stand beside him. "Just thinking about everything that's happened," he replied. "The ICC facility is abandoned for now, but they'll be back with more forces." "Yes," she agreed, "but we will be ready. The heart strengthens daily, and our people prepare." In the weeks since the sanctuary's destruction, they had received reports of other Xylosian clans rising up against ICC outposts across the planet. The awakening had spread, inspiring resistance where before there had been cautious hiding. "You never did complete the release ritual," Seraphina observed. "Do you regret that choice?" Kalen turned to her. In the golden light, her blue skin and silver eyes seemed to glow. The markings on her skin, the biodata that contained generations of knowledge, formed patterns he had come to find beautiful. "No," he said simply. "I don't regret it." Since their reunion, their bond had deepened further. What had begun as an unwanted magical connection had evolved into something chosen, something cherished. The Xylosians had a word for it that didn't quite translate to common, something beyond obligation, beyond friendship, beyond even love. It was a recognition of souls aligned. "Lyra asks when you will teach her more about the stars," Seraphina said, smiling. The child had become his shadow, fascinated by his stories of other worlds. In turn, Kalen had found her the daughter he had never thought to have. "Tonight," he promised, "I've been charting the constellations visible from this hemisphere, different from what I could see from my old shelter." They stood in comfortable silence, watching as the first stars appeared in the darkening sky. From below came the sounds of the settlement, voices, music, life. Somewhere among those voices was Lyra, waiting for her evening astronomy lesson. "Do you miss your old life?" Seraphina asked suddenly. "The solitude?" Kalen considered the question. His years of self-imposed isolation had been a form of penance, a way of coping with the guilt and trauma of Ganymede. It had been empty existence, not living. "No," he said finally. "I don't miss it at all." He reached out, taking Seraphina's hand. Through their touch, the Covenant bond glowed warmly, visible now as a faint luminescence where their skin met. What had begun with a simple act of kindness, feeding a hungry alien child, had brought him more than he could have imagined: purpose, belonging, family. Together, they turned from the cliff edge and walked back toward the settlement, toward Lyra, toward home. The stars of Xylos shone down upon them, ancient and enduring, witnesses to a bond that transcended worlds, a bond formed by an ancestral rite that had brought healing to them both. "You fed my alien daughter," Seraphina said softly as they walked, echoing words she had spoken when they first met. "And now I belong to you by ancestral right." Kalen smiled, completing the thought. "And I belong to you."